Good morning. I am Nasinga Burton, and welcome to the NNPA Black Press USA live streams. Today, I am very excited to have someone with me, Carlton Hargro, who is the founder of 20th Place Media, which is a Black comic book publishing company. Well, they do a lot of things, but that's one of the things that they do. Also, the founder of Slow Mo Magazine. So he's a Black entrepreneur who's working in this, what we call the blurred space, if you will. So we're happy to have you today, and we are looking forward to talking to you. Welcome, Carlton.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Yes, yes. And we're kind of getting the band back together. We've worked together over the years. So
Yes.
it's really cool. He used to be my editor in chief. So I'm very happy to be doing this interview with you. But let's get started. Black comic
Okay.
books. Tell
Black
me, how
comic
did you
books.
how did you get into it? Like what made you a comic book lover?
Well, I grew up reading comic books. It was the kind of thing that at the time, everybody in the neighborhood, if you were, it really was kind of focused, especially for boys. I think
Mhm.
comics were pushed on boys growing up. And I think more than anything, I got into them maybe even more than some of my neighbors and friends. But I just really gravitated toward what they call like sequential art, like storytelling using like multiple panels, words and pictures mixed together. For some reason, that just resonated with me. But
Mhm.
the ideas of that you read about in comic books, sort of the speculative fiction, like the what if, that kind of thing always excited me. So as soon as I picked up my first few comics, it really got me, it opened my mind up to a whole new way of thinking about life and astronomy, biology, all these different kind of things. So ever since then, I've been hooked. And I'm actually a collector. I collect comics. I own probably about 10,000 comic books.
Yes.
Um, yeah, but growing up, the one thing that stood out really more than anything was that the black characters that appeared in comic books, which cross genre, superheroes, spy, all kind of different genre. Um, the black characters were horrible. I mean, the representation, like the way they were presented, their personalities, they really represented some of the worst aspects, some of the worst stereotypes. So I picked that up as a kid, early
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
hmm
Very. So, what made you? You say you're a collector. You have over 10,000 books, comic books. What are some of your favorites?
My favorite comic books. I tell you what, there's a comic book, Avengers Annual number 10. It's actually the first appearance of Rogue from the X-Men. And it is one of my favorite comic books of all time. It's the kind of thing where whenever I go looking through old comics and boxes and stuff, I always buy it. I buy it over and over again. I probably own about 20 of them. I don't know why I do that, but it's just that particular book, the art and the story is written by Chris Claremont, who is the guy who basically created the X-Men as we know it. He didn't make them up, but he perfected them and turned them into the franchise they are now. But I gravitate toward a lot of what people would consider scrub characters. You know what I mean? Like the Beast and Iceman and just even the sad thing is a lot of the black characters were kind of the scrub characters at the time. Now they're better. Like Black Lightning back in the day, people were not digging Black Lightning. See, in back in the day, Black Lightning had his mask was attached to an afro wig. I'm not even kidding you. I'm not even kidding you. He would put the whole thing on. That was not cool. That was lame, and like Luke Cage, had on disco shirt and a tiara, and I'm gonna tell you something. The most disappointing thing for me was as a kid, we saw Luke Cage and we would be like, oh man, it's a black superhero, let me try to get into this. And they used to have a handbook where they would tell all the powers of the characters. And we read in the handbook, it says something like the Hulk can lift 100 tons, right? And we're like,
Mhm.
okay, Spider-Man can lift 10 tons, right? And then Luke Cage can lift 3 tons. It's like, what? He's a chump. So now I will say over the years they have increased his strength, but at the time he was a chump. So I think I kind of secretly I like underdog characters. So,
Okay.
but as I got older, also I got into lots of different other kind of comic books, like a lot of slice of life comics, like Harvey Picard. That movie American
Mhm.
Splendor was about him.
Mhm.
Even like R. Crumb, who has a lot of crazy racial stuff in his past, but he was a great artist. Um, like war comics, and just I got into a lot of other stuff as I got older. Horror,
So who's your favorite? Like, who's your favorite comic book character?
character. You know what?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't have a favorite comic book character. I mean, I like certain ones. Like I love the Black Panther, especially the Black Panther. Also, when he first appeared, he was cool. Stan Lee created the Black Panther. Him and
Right.
Jack Kirby, very cool character at the time. But then people forget for about 20 years he was a scrub. And when I tell you this guy got his butt kicked on every page he appeared in from about 1965 to 1970 to 1990. He got spanked. But so much so to where the guy who made Black Panther cool, Christopher Priest, is a writer. He actually referenced the fact that he was known as a scrub in his first like few issues of taking
Mhm.
over the book in the 90s. So he made him cool. He put the vibranium suit on. He did all this. He created the Dora Milaje. He did all that really cool stuff you see. But from about 1970 something to 1990, he was getting spanked. But I do like Black Panther now. After Christopher Priest fixed him up, I really like the Black Panther. But also, of course, I love like Batman, of course, but I love his sidekick, his first
Okay.
sidekick, which was Robin, but it later became Nightwing. I
Okay.
love Nightwing, and I'll tell you why I love Nightwing. He's a white dude. But I love Nightwing because he's basically like, what if Batman did not have as many personality issues? It's
Right.
like what
Right.
Nightwing's parents in the story were killed as well, and
Uh huh.
Batman trained him, but he did a different thing with the trauma. He didn't make it like his obsession. He found a way to get past the trauma and use it as a way to honor his parents' lives. So
Mhm.
I like Nightwing, but Nightwing doesn't have any powers. He's a regular guy. He's an acrobat. Um, and I think I like people like that. I like people who don't have a lot of power.
Right.
Necessarily. Yeah, but
Right.
can really use it to their advantage. So those kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so like, who are the for people who are novices, right? Who aren't really into Black comic books, right? Maybe they're
Yes.
Marvel
Yes.
fans, Marvel Universe fans in film or what have you. Like, what are
Right.
like the three essential comics like that they should start with?
Hmm. That's interesting. Let's see. I would say,
You sound like you're editing my piece. Hmm, that's interesting.
yeah, for real. But no, I would say the comics you definitely have to own if you are interested in comics or pop culture in that kind of sense at all. Genre fiction, uh, Watchmen, definitely. The comic book. Now, a lot
Yes.
of people have seen the Watchmen TV show that came on HBO, has been very popular. It's basically the sequel to the comic book. So
Hmm.
don't watch the movie though. The movie's not good, but the comic book is really good. Alan Moore wrote it. Dave Gibbons drew it. And it's just like it is considered a masterpiece, of
Someone
comics.
said Blood Syndicate.
Mm, yeah, Blood Syndicate was interesting. Let's put it like this. See, Blood Syndicate is a comic book that was published by like an imprint called Milestone Media, which is
Okay.
one of the most famous black comic imprints. It was an offshoot. I'm not gonna say that it was tied to DC Comics. It still is. But they appeared in the 90s, and they published a bunch of comics starring primarily African American, but other minority characters too. One of their comics was called The Blood Syndicate, which was about a superpower gang.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't heroes, they were a gang. And that was the whole tagline. They're not heroes, they're a gang, which is cool, you know. But I'm like, I don't really know if that was necessarily the book that I needed to read at the time. I can say over time, it became sort of like an X-Men kind of book, these marginalized people, whatever. But they published a comic book. They published Icon, and they published Static Shock or Static,
Hmm.
which went on to be called Static Shock, which was an animated series. That was their most popular one, Static. So,
Yeah,
but Milestone was cool.
Our resident blurred Noah Washington said that Static Shock should be on the list in the
Static
comments.
Shock. Let's put it like this:
He said,
the
and of
the
course, Static Shock.
well, the first few the Static run that was written by a guy named Dwayne McDuffie is great. Art by John Paul Leon, incredible. When they left the book, was not as good, but when they were on it, Dwayne created it. John drew it, stellar. It was really like a nerdy black kid. It was like a black Spider-Man, like a black Peter Parker,
Hmm.
and it was just really well done. Dwayne McDuffie was the best writer to come through Milestone. He was one of the creators, one of the architects. He's passed away. He also went on to write a lot of Justice League animated series stuff.
Yes. Hmm.
But yeah, Dwayne, when he wrote Static, it was really, really good. I will say that.
Okay.
So yeah, you can throw that on there too. But I will say Black Panther by Christopher Priest, okay? And they have his whole series run collected in trade paperback. You can buy it on Amazon. I think it's called Black Panther by Christopher Priest. That to me is up there with Watchmen. I really believe that. A lot of
Okay.
people don't give it the credit it's due. But it's a masterclass in comic book writing. Black Panther by Christopher Priest. Read that.
Got you. So,
Yeah.
what about? And I was thinking about Ta-Nehisi Coates and
Right.
other folks who've kind of been writing in that space. But what motivated you? So, is it the fact that the characters were chumps, like the characters that look like you or that you would like identify with were chumps that motivated you to start making comics or to start publishing comics or to found your company? Like, what was your motivation ultimately?
Well, for 20 Plays Media, the goal has always been to broaden the idea of what it means to be a black person in the world. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, black Americans, we create a lot of culture that goes around the world. And I think a lot of times that culture is it's not necessarily a full representation of who we are in a whole sense. Like I really don't mind if you have a superpower gang. I don't really mind it, if you have a crime oriented book that has African Americans in it. The problem is that we don't have enough diversity in our
Right.
representation, right? So that was a cool thing about Milestone at the time. They had a book about a gang member, some gangs, and then they had a books about other people that were not gang members. So
Right.
I'm like, okay, how can I use popular culture to push the idea that we can represent so many different facets, so many different personalities, yet still be authentically black, you know? So that's really was the idea. Is like I saw how comic books were really being mined from an IP perspective for video games, toys, movies, television, making billions of dollars, um, but not a lot of African American or minority characters coming through that vertical integrated whatever. So it's like, okay, I want to get some characters in the pipeline that really represent some different types of black people, um, who are, black people that I know. It's funny, a lot of times when we get a chance to write something, we default to the stereotypes that we are have been thrust on us.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like I don't let me write about people I know. I know people who are professional visual artists, photographers, dancers, journalists, editors, in the military. I know all kind of black people. So why we keep writing about black people who from the hood or I'm poor, or it's like we're still doing that to this day,
Right.
and it
Right.
blows my mind.
Hmm.
So I wanted to enter some characters in that conversation.
Okay. What are your thoughts about Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, though?
Oh, The Dark Knight's an incredible book. Now, look, the first one, okay, because
The
there have
first
been
one.
other ones since. Yeah,
Clarification. The first one is good. The first
the
one is good.
first, the
Norman. The
first
first one.
series,
Yeah.
yeah, the first series is great. Now, once it started going on, getting a little choppy, but Frank Miller. he's a genius in terms of the comics. Now he's done some weird stuff later on, but the comics, Frank Dark Knight. Also, I would say his book. He did a series called Sin City, which went on
Yes.
to be a movie. The first movie was pretty good. The second one was not, but the series, the comic series, is mind blowing. It's mind
Okay.
blowing. So basically, Frank Miller made his career doing Daredevil. His Daredevil run was great. Dark Knight and all his Batman stuff, Batman Year One,
Mm-hmm.
and Sin City,
Right.
and then he did 300 too. But those were his like major works that people just need to get their hands on. But yeah, definitely, the first Dark Knight.
Okay, cool. So, Africa's African American Film Critics Association, Rhonda Rocha
Yes,
Penrice wants you to know that working class is not poor.
I
So
know.
she said,
I grew up. Look, tell her I grew up working class airport. Ronnie know me. I'm from Gary, Indiana, man. Whatever.
yes, and our
Poor is
Black
poor
Press
though.
USA resident fan, Annette Phillips, who tunes in for all of our live streams. Hello. She wants to say, Black
Okay.
culture represent. And then, of course, Noah Washington, of course, is trying to get ahead of me on this interview. Noah, we get into the film adaptations. Just relax a bit. We gotta tell people. Not everybody knows about the comics and what's going on. So tell me, like,
Yes.
what are you publishing right now? What is 20th Place publishing right now? What titles do you have?
Uh, so we have three main characters. We have Nia Griggs and the Comedic Sisterhood of Science, which is sort of like this espionage superhero thing. Uh, and then we have Makosa, which is a crime book. It's like a detective procedural type book. Recently, a side note, recently I've been going back watching a lot of procedural private investigation shows from the 70s. Barnaby
Okay.
Jones, Cannon, stuff like that, Mannix. So I like that, I like the structure of those shows. So Makosa is kind of like a strange throwback to that, as well as pulp characters like the Shadow,
Yes.
Spirit, Saint, people like that, right? So that's
Hmm.
Makosa. But he wears his African mask, and he wears like a suit, like a black suit and African mask,
Hmm.
which is I just like that visual. I don't know why. And then we have the last one is called Moses, which is a science fiction story about a woman who rescues people who have been abducted by aliens. So it's sort of
Hmm.
like this kind of slight analogy, a slight metaphor for slavery, but it's very slight. And it's not heavy-handed. It's real slight. So those are the three characters that we work on.
Okay, very good. All right, so when we talk about Black comic books, a lot of them, here we go, Noah. A lot of them move into the film realm. Like when you were talking about Sin City, which was directed by Frank Miller, Quentin Tarantino, and
Yeah.
Robert Rodriguez, who I actually teach as an auteur in
Yes.
class
Yes.
because we need to teach people other than Tarantino and Hitchcock as auteurs. But I digress.
Please. Yes.
So you have
Yeah.
these people who are like really working to kind of bring this pulp movement or these types of novels, the Marvel universe onto the film, onto screen. And then
Right.
now you have like, all of these other types of television programming. Watchmen came to HBO. You also
Yeah.
have Love Craft Country, which is like just
Hmm.
killing it. And I don't know, did you ever watch Happen Leonard?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, because they have some science fiction going on in there too, and it's really interesting the way that they do it.
Okay.
Anyway, a lot of it is around race, issues of race, and
Okay.
racism. But what do you make of this rise? I would say, probably over the last, well, Sin City is a little bit older, but like in recent years of this rise of like Black science fiction, these kind of narratives around Black people's lives that are making their way to film and screen. And if you want to talk about some of the adaptations, that would be good too.
Yeah. I mean, well, let's put it like this. I think Hollywood and the television industry, movie industry sees that comic books have intellectual property that is valuable, and they saw how much money Marvel really. I think Marvel showed Hollywood how much money could be made off these properties, and so everybody was kind of looking for what we got, and so. I think now after really, 10, 12 years of really, um, focusing on white IP, I think now the tables have kind of turned to IP from people of other races. And so luckily there is stuff on the table. Now I will say stuff like Watchmen. Watchmen was kind of repurposed into something that went on to feature a lot of black characters. Because in the comic book, there's like none in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, but I love the way that they, use history to kind of repurpose the direction of Watchmen. Lovecraft Country is a whole different thing because that's was a book series, but in comics now there are some things coming up. There's some deals that have been made. There's a book called The Bitter Root.
Yes, the
It's
Bitterroot.
called Bitter Root. It's called Bitter Root,
Mm-hmm.
and then actually it's kind of funny because there's slight. I can see people thinking that it's Lovecraft Country esque because it takes place in the Harlem Renaissance. It's about a family of people who hunt down monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a deal, a movie deal, and I guess it's in development. But I think when it finally hits the screen, they're really gonna have to do a lot to differentiate it from Lovecraft Country because people see black people, period piece, monsters. Oh, this is just like Lovecraft Country. So it's like we got to make sure that we explain to people this is not the same thing. So, but that's coming. There's another book called Trill League, which is sort of a parody homage to, it's like a young black version of like the Justice League or something like that. And I think 50 Cent is involved with that. And there is a series that's on right now. I haven't even watched it yet, but it's a guy named Keith Knight did comics for like years, and now he has this thing that's been adapted, and it's called Woke, and it's on
Mm-hmm.
Hulu, and
Mm-hmm.
it was based on his comic work. I don't think it was based on any particular story, but I think it's based on him as a cartoonist
Right.
because his stuff is more like first person slice of life humor stuff. And then there's one more. Oh, there's a book called Philadelphia. It's a comic book called Philadelphia about vampire like black people fighting vampires in Philadelphia in back in the day. That's another one. It's a period piece and it's vampires. So I hope that Lovecraft Country doesn't take the juice out of these properties because people will just say, "Well, we can't do another one of those," or maybe they say, we can do it now because it's been done, but the fans will confuse them. So we shall see um, what happens. But those are some properties that's coming up. I think that, like I said, people did all these white properties. Now they're looking around. They said, "Hey, we are kind of facing some issues of diversity. What black properties do we have sitting around?" And then there's some people like 50 Cent and Lee Daniels who have an interest in getting this stuff to the market. They're like, "Hey, I want some of this money too." So,
Yeah, and that's a question I have for you. It seems like the same people, and I know how Hollywood works, right? They're bottom line driven industry. If you have a proven track record of success, they're definitely going to work with you. That's who most people get the opportunities. That's how it happens. But do you see spaces opening up for new creatives, or just kind of like the same people who've already been successful in the space being able to now venture out into this kind of space? You know what I
you mean
mean?
like on the film side or on the
On the
comic book
creative
side?
side, on
On
the
the
film and television side. So
Okay,
I'm thinking
yeah,
about The Walking Dead. I'm thinking about,
right,
all of the,
right,
Black
yeah,
Panther or what have you. But whenever I see new shows, like you were talking about Woke, right? That's a different, yeah, it's a writer, right? But
right,
in a
yeah,
different space. That's a different person in this field, at least at the level that we know of, right? But I'm talking
yeah.
about other folks, like you said, 50 Cent, you said Lee Daniels. They've been successful already in TV
Hmm.
and film. So what is it? Are there going to be greater opportunities for people who don't already have prior success because of this whole diversity and inclusion push in Hollywood? Do you think, or are they going to stick with the same folks and just kind of keep the
Right.
same people working?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that right now, with so many different streaming services looking for content, everybody's looking for IP. I think you can't help but have new voices. I mean, I know of a lot of people, just myself, who are like now in writing rooms, in writers'
Hmm.
rooms where they were never before. Um, so I don't know if they can make their way up to showrunner and that kind of thing, but um, and the other side of it is people who get these options for these shows, like a comic creator, when they sell their options, a lot of times they're getting it where they can be executive producer or that kind of thing. So, I think maybe in that way, the pipeline can draw some people into it who have not been before. But, Hollywood is going to go with the name people first,
Yeah, yeah.
but I mean, I would love to see people like Issa Rae do some stuff in this kind of genre world. Even like some up and coming filmmakers like Najla Moomin and like people like that. I want to see them get their hands on this genre fiction type stuff.
Yeah, Rhonda said that Maurice Marable is behind woke as well,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
yeah, so that's really good.
Yeah.
So back to Black comics, really. How hard is it to break into the comic book space for Black people?
Well, you know what? I'm gonna tell you something. It is kind of difficult because so when you think of the comic industry, the thing that differentiates it is the distribution network that it has. So if you think of comics as being primarily sold at comic book stores, that's called the direct market, right? There's only there used to be one distributor that handled the whole comic industry for decades, right? But now there's that space after the pandemic, more distributors are moving into the space. There's actually a Black distribution company that just opened up a few months ago, and I'm excited about that. So it's
What's the name of the
difficult. So
company? The
I
Black
can't. I
distribution
forgot the
company. I'm sorry.
I
Okay,
forgot the name of it.
but look it
Yeah, I
up.
really
But
should have
look it
looked that
up.
up. But anyway, Black comic book distribution company. But yeah. So distribution has always been the issue. It's like it's hard to convince at the time the distributor to carry your stuff because they're not sure it's going to sell. Well, at the retailers will buy it. They're not sure because they're like, well, nobody is not. They don't really buy the. A lot of the clientele is like white men. They don't really want that. A few years ago there was a big push where they took a lot of classic characters and made Black versions of them. That's when you remember an Endgame where, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, when Captain America, when Cap gives the shield to Falcon, and Falcon is later say, okay, I'm going to become Captain America. That happened in the comic years ago. So during that time, it was a lot of Black and minority characters that took over for white classic characters like Thor, Iron Man, whatever, right? And it did not work out. The sales plummeted, and a lot of people blamed it on the fact that it was diverse characters instead of blaming it on the fact that the comics weren't that good, the stories weren't
Right.
that great. I don't want to see. Honestly, look, I want to see a Black teenage superhero. I don't want to see a Black teenage Iron Man. I don't. I want to see Tony Stark. Then give me a
Right.
new character, right? So a lot of people, I think, kind of felt that way. But then when they read the books were really bad. So that put a damper on a lot of the diversity initiatives that publishers were trying. I think at the time, because stores were like, well, nobody bought this, so they're not going to buy the next Black comic. So that's why it's tough to break into the direct market. Now, I will say this: thank God for the internet. Um, Now you have basically direct to consumer sales where they never existed before. So there are a
Hmm.
lot of guys who sell direct, like people like the Tuskegee Heirs. I don't know if you heard that comic. It's like a science fiction book where they're like descendants of the Tuskegee Airmen. Um,
Hmm.
books like Trill League. Uh, there are a lot of just like straight up direct to consumer books, and that's where I think the future is going to be. Us selling directly to fans, kind of overshooting the stores and overshooting distributors that kept us out. You know, now we
Hmm.
can break beyond, and a lot of that stuff is happening in crowdfunded spaces. You know,
Right.
Kickstarter, Indiegogo. People are using those. There's an anthology coming out soon about Black noir comics.
Hmm.
So like mystery, that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
detective books, that kind of thing. So those spaces, they're using those crowdfunding spaces to get funded and then to sell directly to consumers.
What
So
do you
it's
think about?
tough.
So, what do you think about DC Comics' decision to manage their own distribution? Like, do you think
uh,
that's a
uh,
response to the direct competition, or?
listen, let me tell you something.
Listen, if anything starts with listen, it's gonna be some good stuff coming after that.
Du- During when the pandemic started, right, and it was going, well, not when it started, but once it was, really going, the only distributor of comic books in the country had to shut down because they were in Maryland and they couldn't operate. So for like a couple of months, comic book industry was effectively shut down, right? So publishers were like, "Oh well, I'm not gonna get my books out for a couple of I don't know how long." DC was like, "Oh hell no." DC was like, "We getting these books out." So they found some mail order comic book companies and went to them. It was two different ones, and they said, "Look, y'all, you want to be distributors?" And they were like, "Yes." So then that's what broke the monopoly of Diamond, who was the only comic book distributor.
Yes.
DC broke the monopoly a few months ago. And so they started going with these guys, and so they had a pipeline of comic book stores. So people were able during the pandemic, they couldn't buy any other books but DC books. Okay. Because I
Hmm.
think what it was, Time Warner recently bought AT&T recently bought Time Warner, who owns
Yes,
DC. And
that's right.
AT&T probably was like, y'all need to figure this out because we need some money. So DC was like, oh, we got you, we got you. So anyway, after once they were operating the distribution companies, the new distribution companies for a while, they decided to totally split from Diamond. So now
Right.
Diamond is less about 30% of their income, and DC is broke the distribution monopoly. So I got no problem with that. I think we need competition in the market. Diamond is a great company, but they operated on their own for so long, and there's many reasons for that. But hey, man, we need competition. So
So does that include like digital versions of the comics in terms of distribution? Like who's that? Who's doing that? Is that still DC and
yeah, so what
um,
it is there are various different digital distributors. I think the
mhm,
biggest one is called Comixology, which is owned by Amazon. They're the biggest one. They
mhm.
actually carry Moses. Thank you for that, Comixology. So you can buy it now. But but yeah, so they run that show, but there are other digital outlets, and there are other digital I think I'm gonna have to switch headphones. There are other digital ways to get digital comics right now too. It's not just all through that one app. You know what I mean?
So
But yeah.
when we're talking about you mentioned some of the what we would call cross casting. Kristen
Hmm.
Warner, if you're watching, jump in here please on the comments. And if she isn't, and somebody else knows Kristen, tag her, text her. She might be teaching, but this whole idea of casting across races, right? I think Noah called it. What do you call it? How do you feel about race-bent casting and film adaptations? So let's talk about comic books and then, because I'm thinking about John Boyega. Um, one of his names is
Yes.
Bamidele, which is my sister's name, which I love. But John Boyega, and some of
Yeah.
the racism that happens when black characters are cast and as character black actors are cast as characters who are traditionally white.
Right.
That also happens in the comic book industry. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think when you talk about like a John Boyega being cast in like Star Wars, I mean that was an original character. So,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, I think Disney, made they tried a new character in the Star Wars universe. I think it could have been handled a lot better, but and I think that he voiced his frustrations about they didn't develop his character enough. He was just kind of like this goofball, and he stayed a
Hmm.
goofball. So
Hmm.
there was a lot of potential, but and I guess he says he's done with Star Wars, but we'll see. I mean, they write the check, he may want to do the Finn Strikes Back story. Um,
Right, right.
but in terms of people casting black people in roles that were traditionally white or something like that, um, to me, if the character's race is not important to the character, if the character's race is not a big deal, like you can't make a white Black Panther. It's not going to work. You know what I mean? But if if there's a not even a side, if there's a minor character or even a major character who, if race is not integral to the that character's personality, you can change it. I don't see the big deal. Now I do think you have to be careful with big characters like big IP like Batman and stuff like that. I think it starts to look a little bit like pandering, but
Yes.
um, I'm more interested in brand new characters. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in brand new characters who are created whole cloth as black characters. That's what I'm really want to see, period. So they can do all this creative casting all they want, but if we don't get real great original black characters into the IP pipeline, in about 10 years, we're going to be in the same situation we were 20 years ago because everything's going to
Right.
dry up, you know? So,
Yeah, and I mean that point you make about pandering is true. It's just like we need our own characters, and they actually exist, right? So,
yeah,
I mean,
totally.
we love the Marvel universe, we do,
Right. Yeah.
but I mean, there are other comics, there are other what I would call unique voices that are happening that exist in different spaces, and so even if and these I'm assuming are non-black executives, but even if
Yes.
you can't think of or know of those folks, you can find those people, and I don't think
Yeah.
it's really as hard as they try to act like as hard as they pretend it is.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, I totally agree with you. We need our own character. Speaking of which, let's talk about Black Panther and Chadwick Boseman.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so let's talk about Black Panther first and what it meant in terms of the Marvel universe. Um, I love that you talked about it as a comic and how he grew, the character grew, and
Yes.
what a great writer and a great illustrator can do for a character.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about the leap from the comic book to the big screen and what that meant as a Black cultural moment, as a cultural moment for America, really, but for two Black people
Totally.
especially.
Yeah. And,
Hmm.
let me say first, as a reader, I never thought I would see a movie starring a Black Panther. Like, if you told me in 1990, oh, they're going to make a movie about the Black Panther, I'd be like, please, why? You know? But man, was it number one? I was amazed when Chadwick jumped out on stage at Comic Con and was like, "I'm the Black Panther." I'm like, what? So as a comic fan, I was blown away. But just think about what Ryan Coogler and Hannah Beachler and Ruth Carter and people like that were able to do with that, just the essence of that property,
Yes.
turning it into this, what I think of as an aspirational film. You know, it was the kind of thing where it was like what we could imagine ourselves to be in the future, right? It was pure
Right.
Afrofuturism. It was,
Yes.
but it was, even though it was in the present day like story, but it was Afrofuturism come to life, and just the detail put into the costuming and the patterns and everything. I mean, it's like I could not have imagined that something would have such an impact to people who have no interest in comics,
Hmm.
So, it became probably one of the most important Black films ever made, period. Um,
Hmm.
and now with the loss of Chadwick, it's, you really, number one, it's just a loss of a human being, a great person. But then you're left to wonder what happens with this franchise. I will say this, whatever they choose to do, I can imagine that the second Black Panther, which is slated to come out 2022, we'll see if that sticks. I can imagine when it hits the second time, it will be just like before, a pilgrimage to the cinema. People in costume. I was Black people cosplaying. These Black people, it was grandmas cosplaying grandpas. You know, I'm like, how we get Black people to cosplay Black Panther?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Outside of the comic space, right? The
right,
Comic
so
Con space.
that's
Hmm.
right. So it was a pilgrimage for us as a people to the cinema, and I think when they do it again, it's going to be just as much, especially for people to find out what they're going to do with the character now that Chadwick has passed. So
Yeah, and can you talk about? Welcome to Chitashi. She is the host of um, Mediascope.
okay,
Um, Yeah, and she's a film scholar and filmmaker. But can you
Cool.
talk about like what that meant when Chadwick Boseman passed away? Like, kind of like the hush that came over Black America. I mean, I think
Yeah,
the country, but definitely
totally.
Black America.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about this is a guy who's played so many iconic black characters. You know, Thurgood
Hmm.
Marshall, uh, Jackie Robinson, James
Hmm.
Brown, and now a fictional character like the Black Panther, who was almost just as potent. So yeah, it was like we lost. He was basically an icon like those people, and we lost
Hmm.
him. Yeah, it's just it was a blow. It was like a blow to the chest. And but I will say I'm so glad that he was able to do such important roles. You know, I
Yes.
was, and in this, you know, I joke a little bit, but I say I think every time he made a film, it's like as if he thought, okay, I want if this is my last film, I would be cool with that. Like some people can't be cool with that. Like Marlon Wayans, you know, do you really want that to be your last movie, Marlon? I mean,
Stop it.
I'm just saying.
Stop it.
Think about it. Think about it. No,
Yeah.
I love Marlon. I love his work. But the point is, he every film was an event, you know. And so when we lost him, it was sort of like, you know, it was a loss from a creative point of view, from our perspective, because he embodied such giants. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, we do love Marlon Wayans. That's what the comments are. And Marlon Wayans is very talented. Very
I love Marlon
talented.
Wayans. The
I
dude
love
is
his
making his own stuff. He's making his own stuff.
body of work is
That's
amazing, and he
right.
is a trained actor. Okay. All right. But you said Afrofuturism, so you know we gotta talk about that. And you can't say Afrofuturism and not talk about Samuel Delaney, Octavia Butler, who's
Octavia,
made
yeah.
the New York Times bestsellers list for the first time
Thank
since she
God.
started
Yeah.
publishing books. The late great Octavia Butler, who is the mother, I would say and father, but mother.
Totally.
No, Mr. Delaney, of Afrofuturism. Of course, there's Basquiat. There's Wytasha Womack. We're talking about graphics, John Jennings. So I'm trying to get on the show. John, you know you want to be on the show. Come on, man. Come on, just say yes.
Come on, man.
So you have all of these people who are really working and have been mining and working in this Afrofuturistic space. Can you talk about that a little bit? This whole movement, and it's new to some people, but it's been happening for a very long
Right.
time. If you talk about if you're thinking about music or spaces to place, things like that, films like that.
Oh
I would
yeah. George
comic slot.
Clinton. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
all of
It's like
that, all of that.
it's been
So,
happening. Yeah,
can you talk
it's
about
been
it?
happening for decades. You know,
Hmm.
I think us just wanting to see ourselves in the future, you know, is like
Hmm.
picturing
Hmm.
ourselves still around in the future. Even if you look at like uh Uhura on Star Trek, that was kind of Afrofuturism right there alive. You know, but I think that I personally gravitate toward the stories. I think there's a lot
Hmm.
of visual, you know, there's a lot of visuals about Afrofuturism, a lot of image stuff, but I really gravitate toward the stories like Octavia Butler. And I had the pleasure
Hmm.
of meeting her like in the 90s in Atlanta. But
Hmm.
she just, you know, she's the one who is the architect who in my from my reading standpoint was the architect of really just taking fantasy elements and mixing it with historical stuff, you know.
Right.
That people weren't doing that at that time. People were not doing that. Now we see a lot of it, but people, and there wasn't even a lot of historical fiction back in the day when you really think about it. I mean, that was kind of a newer innovation, but I mean, what more can you say about her? You know what I mean? So people like her, um, especially her, like really built the bridge to where we are now. I will say, I want to see more works of I want story. I want to see more story.
Yeah.
Afrofuture story. I'm not so interested in the visuals. I'm not so interested in the look. I'm interested in the stories. Give me the stories. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think when we sit down to write too much, we're just writing about our pain, our current pain or past pain. It's like let's channel that pain into a vision of the future. And I think that's what Black Panther did so well. You know, It's like that's what I'm really interested in seeing. You know, as a consumer, I want to see that.
Yeah. And can you yeah, I totally agree. There's a film called Pumsy. It was a short film that came out. Did you ever see that film?
I don't
I
think
always tell
so.
people that they should absolutely watch it. It's a Kenyan filmmaker, Wanuri Kauya. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's amazing. Great story. And it looks fantastic. It's an award-winning film. And I'm trying to interview her too. But
Okay.
in terms of story, I feel you on that. Because there are a lot of stories that have been told and need to be told and can be elevated in these various spaces. When we think about, can you talk about cons like that? You know, because Carlton is one of the judges for the Afro Comic Con's virtual film festival, virtual short film
Hmm.
festival that will be going up October 24th. But can you talk about the importance of cons, particularly Afro Comic Cons, like Black themed Comic Cons? Because you mentioned cosplay and things like that. But can you talk about the importance of that and elevating kind of this kind of comic superhero horror? There's
Yeah.
a lot that goes on with that kind
Right.
of content or elevating those stories.
Yeah. I mean, conventions have always been a big deal in the comic book world. If you look back at like the early San Diego Comic Cons, which went on to just be called Comic Con International, Chicago Comic Con, which I went to when I was 12 years old. Um, New York Comic Con is now taking a big, a role. When you look at those things as being gathering places for like-minded people, even beyond just what you see on walking on the convention floor, the panels that take place, the workshops, it is a place where people can come and build community.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
for so long, we really were left out of that world. You know, we would be on, like, I think at the San Diego Comic Con. Now it's a little different, but they used to just be just like the black panel. It was like a panel with all the black folks on it, and which is
Hmm.
cool. I think we should do that. But when you look at stuff like Onyx Con, the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention, um, those kind of things, when you look at those, it's like it's just for us. So of course, if you are interested in that world, it's like you can go and then just kind of feast on everything there. It's like a smorgasbord. I will say though, I would like to see. I think we're at a point now where there's a lot of product, and I would like to see a little more curation of these events um, when it comes to panels and things like that. I think we're beyond the stage where I just want to see some black comics. It's like, okay, we
Right.
got the black comics now, so now we got all these different types of black comics. Or even films, genre type films. It's like, okay, so I think we can curate these things even tighter now. I think that's
Yes.
the. I think we need to start moving that direction. You know.
Right. And so we have questions coming in for you. One
Okay.
is, in your opinion, what's next for Black comic or superheroes? Like, where are they going? Because you said you want something new or different. We're beyond like, oh, it's just a Black superhero. Oh, let's make
Right.
Batman
Right.
Black or his son Black or whatever. But where
Right.
do you think we're going? And
Well,
that's from Chitashi.
yeah. Honestly, I don't really like creatively. I'm more interested in the business side of it for what's next for Black comics, and I'm hoping that this Black distribution company, comic distribution company, can play a role in getting more Black comics created by Black people, about Black characters into stores. That's really
Yes.
the next thing. It's like I want to see more direct to consumer mail order comics, and I want to see Black distribution companies and even my majority owned distribution companies get these comics into more stores. Like we
Okay.
won't we have to be able to build a business, like
Hmm.
if we can't make any money, these things will stop. All right.
Right.
So there's a lot. I mean, there's a great website called Peep Game Comics, Comix, Peep, Peep Game Comics. It's a black digital comic distribution company. So if you want to really get a chance to peruse a lot of black comics, go there. But it is owned by a real cool black dude, and it all they sell is like black characters featuring comics featuring black characters. Okay, so
Hmm.
we gotta. Those people won't be able to continue doing what they're doing if people aren't buying the stuff. And I want to see a lot of those people who are just in the digital space make the leap into physical books, but they got to have stores that's going to put them in. So that's what I want to see.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. So if you have questions, please send them. We have Leon Smith who's telling us to check out Maddie's Rocket by Tim Fielder. We have Tim Fielder who's actually on, who's saying, thank you. Leon shouted you out, Tim. We also have a question from Bill Benson. Is the Green Lantern Far Sector book, does that fit what you're talking about in terms of Afrofuturism?
Yeah. I mean, let's put it like this. From a visual standpoint, I mean, that character does. In that storyline, it's a black Green Lantern who is in this sector that's far out from the other Green Lanterns. Anybody who reads comics may know that there are lots of different Green Lanterns, and she's one of them. I think the difference with that being Afrofuturistic is that the world around her is not based on Afrofuturism. She's just in a high tech society. So she's a black woman in a high tech society. So I mean, I guess she is an Afrofuturistic element in that story. I guess you could say, but it's not, Wakanda. It is
right. And speaking of
else.
Wakanda, word on the street is that Shuri is going to be the character Shuri is going to be the next Black Panther in the second movie. And actually that had been kind of leaking out in the press about 6 months prior to Boseman's passing. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, and just the role, because you have a very strong woman character in your comics.
That's right. I have two great women. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Listen, I'm gonna tell you something. I'm down with Shuri. Shuri was the Black Panther in the comic. Anybody who knows, she spent the time as the Black Panther. I think it's a cool way you can do that. However, I have a pitch.
Okay.
If Kevin Feige is listening, or Ryan Coogler, check it out. What if Okoye was the Black Panther?
Now Ryan might be watching. Ryan, you might be watching.
What if Okoye became, because she's already a warrior. Remember, Lupita's character said, "You are the best warrior in Wakanda." Yes. Okay, so she's already all halfway there. But I think if you do Shuri, I think you'd have to step up the technological aspects of it to kind of make up for. I mean, she's gonna take the root or drink that to get her abilities. But I think Okoye could be cool, and it would be a left turn. People not be expecting it. It would be
that
dope.
would be hot, says Chitachi, and I believe that too, Tachi. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Like
I will say,
Ryan, I'm gonna send this to Ryan so he can see it.
Send it to Ryan. I will say this: there's been some talk of people saying they should recast T'Challa, the T'Challa character. I think Marvel is not going to do that. Marvel got sense. Not. Kevin got sense. Not. They ain't crazy. That would destroy the franchise. People would revolt. I'm totally against it. I think the story's already set up for you to have many different Black Panthers, so you could have another one.
Yeah, Okita is like, that's what I said. She has your same idea too. Okita, yes.
Oh, Okoye, okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Okoye, yes. And Noah, our resident blurred, is like, yes, that's a great idea. We also, yes. Noah also wants to know, what do you think about Ray Fisher's war on WB after his treatment on the Justice League set?
Yeah, I mean, let's put it like this. Look, if that's what happened to you, that's messed up. But he's going to war against some powerful people. And I think if he was white, he may be able to walk out of this maybe unscathed. But now that WB is actually challenging what he was saying a little bit, because he's going after Jeff Johns, who's one of their boys, who actually, the Stargirl series that he just did, where they shot it in Atlanta, it was actually really good. But so, I mean, look, if that's Ray's story, Ray's got to come out and tell his story. But I think Ray also has to understand that, I mean, look, man, there's going to be some ramifications for this. And, that's all. I mean, I got his back. Whatever he makes, I'll watch it. If it's something I'm interested in, I support him. And I think we all should. But I think that he's very early on in his career still. And, I mean, he's got to be careful. Like, he has to know what his own end game is, what he's trying to get, So, but he's going to be in the Snyder cut of the Justice League that's coming on HBO Max, and it's going to be, I don't know, I don't think they're reshooting anything, but That'll give him a boost because he's featured more in the Snyder Cut. His character has a bigger role, so maybe he knows that he's like, I'm about to get some, some eyeballs anyway, so I'm going out like
Hmm.
this. But I just want him to think about what his end game is and what he wants to prove. But we got his back, and DC be messing up anyway. I love DC, but a lot of they just started to make some good movies. Which
Right.
Joker, I did not like Joker.
You
Can I
didn't
say
like
that?
Joker?
I did not like
Oh, we
Joker.
gotta talk about that offline. We
It was
got
an ugly film. It was an ugly film.
it was hard to watch for
It
sure, but
was
I think that was the
hard to watch.
intention. That was the
Well, they
intention. I
mission
mean,
accomplished.
yeah. All right. So my last question, Tashi, we did talk about John Boyega earlier, but what my last question for you is: are you watching Lovecraft
Yes.
Country, and what are your thoughts on that particular show? And if
Here's
you're
my
not watching, people, you have to watch it. And if you have not
yeah.
watched Watchmen, watch Watchmen, please.
Right.
So
See,
when I
there's
talk to Mr. Gossett, y'all can have some good questions. But go ahead.
and see that's my here's my issue with Lovecraft Country. I think it's a great series. It's beautifully shot. It looks great. There's a lot of mythology. I think that they, for whatever reason, made the creative choice to cram a lot of stuff into those first like 3 episodes. I mean, they are jam packed to the point where
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wonder some of the emotional impact is not really hitting me. Like when people die,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, is he dead? Or like, well, what happened? And I'm like, okay, should I be sad now? Like, oh, it's because it's 400 vampires coming out, and then there's a mummy, and then there's a ghost. Okay, now we're back. What? So I think that they threw a lot at us. If you look at Watchmen, and I don't want every show to be Watchmen, but it was paced in such a way where it hit you, right? It took the
Yes.
time to hit you. And I will say
Yes.
the fourth episode of, I think it was the fourth one of Lovecraft Country, they slowed down the pace. It was the drag episode. They
That was
slowed down the
it's five.
pace.
It's episode
That
five, I think.
okay, 5. That was a
Mm-hmm.
great episode. I really loved it a lot. They slowed down the pace, and we got a chance to really explore those two storylines. So I think the more they do that, the more successful they will be in terms of impact, social, emotional impact. But it's a great show. It's very well done, and a lot of my friends are in it. So hey, I wish them nothing but success. They got a season 2 coming. I know for a fact. It's going to
Yes.
happen, right? Come on.
Oh, of course. Oh, it has, and I
Mm-hmm.
love the performances by the lead actors. They're amazing. And I just realized the brother on in the film is also from The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which I had no idea.
Ah, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
because that's one of my favorite films of last
That's
year or the year
cool.
before last.
Mm-hmm.
So we got Bill Benson, who's giving you all, look in the comment section, folks. He's giving you the hits on where you can reach or you can read more about Black comics or DC comics. We got Tim Fielder, who's got a novel, Infinitum, an Afrofuturist tale coming out on HarperCollins Amistad. So he's got the link in there. But I want to thank you, Carlton, for all of your wonderful information. I just love like your textbook, like dictionary, encyclopedic knowledge of the comic industry and Black pop culture. You also have a Slow Mo magazine. People check that out. It's a music magazine. It's dope. Definitely check it
Thank you,
out
thank you, thank you.
and subscribe. But thank you so much for having us, and tell people where they can reach you, where they can buy your comic,
Yeah.
and where they can follow you on Twitter or Instagram so they can know what you're thinking.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something. If you wanna follow the comic company, I would say the best thing to do is go to our Instagram page, which is 20th Place Media. On Instagram, 20th Place PLACE Media. And if you want to learn more about the Soul Music Magazine, Slow Mo, go to slowmoatl.com, SLOMOATL.com. And then I'm on Instagram at HARGROC C on IG. I don't post a lot of stuff though. So I say go to 20th Place Media. You probably get more content that way. So
Okay,
anyway,
perfect.
but this has been a lot of
Thank
fun. Thank you.
This was great, right? I told you it was going to be easy lifting, just us talking. So thank you so much
Girl, you have done it.
for coming on. All right, and we're going to have you back because we're going to have you
Oh
back.
yeah, I want to be back. I want to be.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
very
we're gonna have
much.
a panel. But thank you so much, and thank you everyone tuning in, and we will see you soon.